You know, people love to say, blood is thicker than water. But what they forget, what they don't tell you, is that even blood can poison you when the heart behind it turns cold. There's a special kind of pain that only family can cause because family, they're not supposed to be the ones who break you. When a stranger betrays you, it stings, but when a sibling, the person who grew up under the same roof, shared the same meals, the same childhood, the same mother's prayers, when they betray you, it doesn't just sting, it sinks, it shakes you to your core, it rattles something deep in your soul, it makes you question everything. Let me tell you something that not everyone will agree with, but you need to hear it clearly. Just because someone shares your DNA doesn't mean they deserve a free pass to mistreat you. Yes, we are taught to forgive, 70 times 7, but nowhere did God tell us to stand still while someone keeps driving the same wound into us over and over again. God calls us to forgive, but He also calls us to walk in wisdom. Forgiveness is about releasing the burden from your heart. It's about freeing yourself, but it doesn't mean you have to keep giving repeated betrayal access to your life. Forgiveness is not permission for someone to keep breaking you. There are siblings who take your loyalty for granted. You cover for them, you defend them, you sacrifice for them, believing they'll have your back when you need them most. But instead, they take advantage. They twist your kindness, they manipulate your trust, they use your love like a safety net, always expecting you to be there. Always assuming you'll tolerate whatever they do. And when you finally draw the line, when you finally say, enough, they flip the story suddenly. You're the villain, they make it look like you're the one who changed. But the truth is, you just got tired of bleeding quietly. Repeated disrespect from a sibling is not something you are required to excuse simply because you're related. When someone mocks your values, belittles your dreams, disrespects your boundaries, over and over again, they're not acting out of love, they're acting out of control. And I don't care if you've sat at the same dinner table for 20 years, if they're tearing down your spirit. It's time to stop giving them access to your peace. You can love someone from a distance, you can pray for them, you can wish them well, but you can also protect your soul from their poison. That doesn't make you heartless, that makes you healed. And sometimes healing means letting go, not with bitterness, not with rage, but with clarity and courage. Some betrayals should absolutely be forgiven, but never forgotten in wisdom. Here's the truth. Family was meant to be a blessing, not a battlefield. The people God places in our lives are supposed to help us rise, not drag us through the dirt of guilt and manipulation. If your sibling consistently chooses pride over peace, control over compassion, disrespect over relationship, then you're not the problem, you're the one who finally opened your eyes. Let me remind you, you are not obligated to keep accepting betrayal just to keep the family photo looking pretty. What matters to God is not how many blood ties you protect, it's how many soul ties you preserve. You are responsible for your own peace, you are responsible for the atmosphere you allow in your heart. God can restore anything, but restoration starts with honesty. And sometimes honesty means admitting that you've been carrying a relationship that hasn't been mutual for a very long time. Sometimes, love means letting go. I'm not saying stop loving them, I'm saying love them with your eyes wide open, love them with discernment, love them with boundaries. Because when someone constantly disrespects you, dishonors you, and expects you to tolerate it simply because you're family, they're not asking for forgiveness, they're asking for permission to keep wounding you. Let this be the moment you reclaim your peace. Let this be the season where you stop confusing loyalty with being a doormat. You were never meant to carry that weight alone, and God did not create you to live in silent suffering. He created you for freedom, for joy, for connection that reflects His love, not control. Not manipulation, not abuse wrapped in the name of family loyalty. So if you've been battling that guilt, if you've been asking yourself, am I wrong for walking away? Let me tell you plainly, you are not wrong, you are not heartless, you are finally healing. There's a betrayal that hides behind a smile, it claps when you win, but the hands aren't genuine, it sits at your table, but the heart is distant, bitter, cold. Sometimes betrayal doesn't come from an enemy, it comes from a sibling. Someone you trusted, someone you thought would always be your biggest cheerleader. But instead, behind closed doors, they weren't praying for you to succeed, they were quietly hoping you'd fall. Because deep down, they couldn't handle the light God placed on your life. Jealousy is dangerous. It doesn't shout, it whispers. It smiles in your face, but secretly measures your blessings against its own. And when it finds itself lacking, it doesn't rejoice with you, it resents you. A jealous sibling may never say it out loud, but their actions scream. They belittle your success, they mock your efforts, they speak death over your dreams, just to keep you small enough to make themselves feel big. That's not love, that's sabotage. That's betrayal wearing the disguise of family. And you must understand, God does not bless you to be punished by those closest to you. Your growth, your elevation, your breakthrough, these are not sins. But to a heart twisted by envy, your rise feels like their fall. So instead of running their own race, they start plotting against yours instead of building alongside you. They tear you down in silence. And the worst part, they'll do it with a look of innocence. They'll say they're joking, they'll say you're too sensitive. But deep down, you feel it, you know it. Betrayal echoes in the spirit, long after the words have been spoken. And maybe, just maybe, you've tried to ignore it, you've told yourself, they're just struggling. They don't mean it. You've excused it as insecurity, as stress, as immaturity. But let me tell you clearly, when someone actively works against your calling, when they sow doubt, when they spread rumors, when they pull others away from you, they're not struggling, they're sabotaging. And that is a betrayal you do not have to forgive into closeness. You can release the weight, you can forgive, but you are not required to walk hand in hand with someone who is quietly hoping you will fail. Some will say, but they're your sibling, you're supposed to stick together. And I agree, but not at the cost of your calling, not at the cost of your mental peace, not at the cost of your purpose. What good is walking together if one is silently poisoning the other? What good is keeping the peace on the outside if your spirit is at war within every time you see them? God did not call you to suffer for the sake of appearances, He called you to walk in truth. And sometimes, that truth will expose even the darkest corners of family. There are people who cannot handle your glow, because it reminds them of their shadows. And instead of dealing with their own darkness, they choose to dim your light. But listen, you don't owe anyone your light, you don't have to shrink to make someone else feel secure, you don't have to apologize for being chosen, for being blessed, for being elevated. If your sibling can't celebrate you, that's a reflection of their heart, not yours. I know it hurts, I know it's confusing. You didn't ask for competition. You wanted connection, you didn't ask for rivalry, you wanted relationship. But sometimes, what we hoped would be family becomes a battlefield. And when that happens, it's not your job to fix it alone. You pray, you forgive, you heal. But you also protect your spirit. Because sabotage disguised as love is still sabotage. And jealousy disguised as concern is still a curse waiting to be spoken. So today, I want you to walk in the truth of who you are. I want you to stop hiding your victories because someone else can't handle them. I want you to stop dimming your smile, shrinking your joy, holding back your testimony. God brought you through too much for you to play small now. And if the people closest to you can't clap without conditions, they were never truly standing with you. Let them wrestle with their own reflection. Let them face the jealousy in their own heart. That's not your burden to carry. Your only job is to keep walking in the light God gave you, keep showing up, keep building, keep believing. And don't you dare let the silent envy of a sibling rob you of your destiny. You see, the painful thing about betrayal from family, especially from a sibling, is that it forces you to learn lessons you never wanted to know. You learn that not everyone who says, "I love you," knows how to protect what's fragile in you. And maybe you've tried to overlook it, you've whispered to yourself, "That's just how they are." You've tried to keep the peace, to preserve the bond, but deep down, you felt the cost, you felt the grief of losing not just your trust, but the version of yourself who once fully believed in their loyalty. That wound, it's real. That's why you don't forget a betrayal like this, because it teaches you something sacred. Not everyone close to you can handle the weight of your truth. Some people think forgiveness automatically means access. They think that once you've let it go, you should immediately go back to sitting at the same table, laughing like nothing happened, sharing your life like the trust was never shattered. But true wisdom says otherwise. True wisdom says, "I forgive you, but I cannot trust you the same way again." That is not hate, that is not revenge, that is protection. That is the kind of wisdom God gives you to guard what is holy inside of you. Don't let guilt trick you into silence. Don't let shame convince you that you were wrong for opening up. You were right to love, you were right to trust. What they did was wrong, but your heart was pure. And hear me, your vulnerability is still a gift, even if someone mishandled it. Just because they didn't know how to value your openness doesn't mean you should become someone who never opens again. No, it simply means you must learn who's worthy of the deepest parts of you, who has proven, not just promised, that they will cover you, not expose you. And maybe you're thinking, but they're my sibling, shouldn't I try again? Only if the fruit has changed. Only if repentance has taken root, only if real transformation is present. Otherwise, what you're doing is walking barefoot into broken glass, hoping this time it won't cut you. And that's not faith, that's foolishness. God wants you healed, not stuck in cycles that keep breaking your heart. So if you've been carrying the weight of that kind of betrayal, let me tell you, it's not your fault, and you don't have to pretend it didn't happen just to keep the family bond intact. If a sibling has used your pain to shame you, you have every right to set a boundary. You have every right to say, I still love you, but you no longer have access to the softest parts of me. That's not cruelty, that's clarity, and sometimes clarity is the very first step toward healing. There's a kind of betrayal that doesn't happen in one explosive moment. It doesn't crash down like a thunderstorm. No, it comes quietly, slowly, over time. It's not what they said, it's what they refused to say. It's not what they did, it's what they refused to do. I'm talking about when your siblings stand by in silence while others tear you down. When they watch you being ridiculed, lied about, misunderstood, and they say nothing, they do nothing. That kind of silence, especially from family, can be louder than any shouted insult. When people you love are under fire, you're supposed to step in, you're supposed to protect them, you're supposed to cover them. To speak up, to stand in the gap when others try to break them. That's what love does, that's what loyalty looks like. And yet, how many people have had to suffer because their own sibling turned their back? Not to betray them directly, but to stay silent when it mattered most. That kind of silence is not innocence, that kind of silence is agreement wearing a mask. You see, when someone is hurting, and you stay quiet, you're still choosing a side. Many people don't realize that neutrality in the face of injustice is not safety, it's silent participation. It's easier, isn't it, to say, I don't want to get involved, to shrug and say, it's between them. But when that them is your own sibling, your blood, you don't get the luxury of indifference. Your silence says to the world, I'm okay with what's happening to them. And I want you to think back, really think, remember the moments when you were misjudged, misunderstood, falsely accused, maybe even humiliated. You looked around, just searching for one voice, just one person to stand beside you. And you saw your own sibling, not standing with you, but quietly stepping aside. Maybe they weren't the ones throwing the stones, but they didn't stop anyone either. That kind of absence, it leaves a wound. It's not always visible, but it cuts deep. You expected to feel their arm around your shoulder, you turned, expecting comfort, but you were met with silence, or worse, distance. It's not always public. Sometimes betrayal by silence happens in the quiet places. In the moments when you needed encouragement, and they offered none. When you were drowning in self-doubt, and they chose not to speak life into you. When others made you feel like you were nothing, and they just sat there, letting it happen. And that hurts more than we often admit, because being betrayed by a stranger, you can recover from that. But being betrayed by your siblings, silence that lingers. It teaches you to keep everything inside. It teaches you to stop expecting backup. It teaches you to stop hoping they'll show up. Because history has told you, they probably won't. And so, you grow strong not because they helped you, but because they didn't. You become resilient not because of their support, but because of their silence. And while that strength is beautiful, it also carries grief, because deep down, you never wanted to walk alone, you just had to. Let me tell you something that might set you free today. You are not bitter for feeling hurt by their silence. You are not wrong for remembering the moments they didn't show up. That pain is real, that disappointment is valid. No, you don't have to carry resentment in your heart forever. But you also don't have to pretend like nothing happened. Forgiveness does not mean pretending they stood up for you when they didn't. It doesn't mean erasing the moments that changed how you see them. Sometimes forgiveness simply means telling the truth to yourself. They could have done more, they should have done more. Some people will say, well, maybe they didn't know what to say. But let's be clear. Silence in the face of wrong is not confusion, it's consent. When your silence protects the wrong voices, it betrays the right ones. You don't have to scream, you don't have to start a war. But you can say, "This isn't right." You can say, "That's my brother. That's my sister. Don't talk about them like that." You can refuse to laugh at cruel jokes, you can stop the gossip in its tracks, you can stand beside the one being torn apart, instead of silently siding with the ones doing the tearing. So if you're the one who has been wounded by that silence, if you've watched your own family stay quiet while you were under attack, hear me. Your worth is not measured by who stood with you, your value is not lost because they didn't defend it. God saw what happened, God heard the words they never said, and He is still fighting for you, even when they wouldn't. Let that be your peace. Because if a sibling stands by while the world tears you down, they've already made their choice. There's a certain sting that cuts deeper than most. It's the betrayal of success. When the people who were supposed to celebrate you quietly resent you. When you start walking in your purpose, when God begins opening doors in your life, when the blessings begin to pour out. Some siblings don't say, "I'm proud of you." They say nothing at all. Or worse, they start tearing you down behind your back. Not because you did anything to hurt them, but because your elevation made their insecurities louder. You see, not every betrayal is loud, not every dagger comes with a scream. Some betrayals come wrapped in silence and sarcasm and subtle jealousy. You begin to notice the shift. They stop asking how you're doing, not because they're busy, but because they don't want to hear how well you're doing. They pull back when you rise, they make sly remarks when others praise you. And the more you grow, the colder they become. That's a kind of betrayal that's hard to talk about, because on the surface, it looks like nothing. But deep in your heart, you know something sacred has changed. It's hard, isn't it? When you used to share your dreams with them, when you thought they would always be the first to clap, the first to cheer, the first to show up when it was your turn to shine. But now, you're standing on your mountaintop and the people you thought would celebrate with you are nowhere to be found. That loneliness can be overwhelming. That kind of loneliness, the one that comes when those you love most drift away, it's heavy. Isn't it because deep down, you didn't just want success, you wanted to share it. You didn't just want to rise, you wanted them to rise with you. But sometimes, the very people who should rejoice with you, the ones who should have been first in line to celebrate, are the ones who turn away when the spotlight finds you. And what's even more painful, some of them won't just pull away, they'll actively downplay what God is doing in your life. They'll say, "You change." But the truth is, you didn't change, you grew, you matured, you stepped fully into the calling God placed on your life. And instead of being inspired by your growth, they became threatened by it. They let jealousy creep in like a slow, silent fog. And when jealousy makes a home in a sibling's heart, love begins to fade. What once was admiration quietly becomes comparison, what once was unity quietly becomes competition. And suddenly, you find yourself not just fighting for your dreams, you're fighting to protect your peace. Here's the hard truth many people don't like to admit. Sometimes your biggest critics carry your last name. Sometimes, the ones who sabotage you don't live far away. Sometimes, it's the people who have known you since you were a child. People who can't stand that God chose to bless you in ways they didn't expect. And you know what, that's not your fault. It's not your job to shrink your light to make others feel more comfortable in the dark. You were never meant to bury your calling just to make someone else feel taller. God's favor on your life is not up for negotiation, it's not based on family approval. And if your siblings' love couldn't survive your breakthrough, maybe their love was never rooted in truth to begin with. Real love doesn't resent. Real love rejoices. Real love says, "I'm happy for you, even if I'm not where you are yet." Real love doesn't compete, it completes. But when a sibling can't handle your success, they reveal more about their heart than they ever reveal about your journey. Maybe you've wrestled with guilt, maybe you've wondered, should I downplay my blessings? Should I make myself smaller to keep the peace? But hear me, never dim the fire God lit in you just because someone else refuses to fan their own. You are not responsible for how others handle your elevation, you are only responsible for walking humbly with what God has given you. I'm not telling you this to make you bitter, I'm telling you this so you can finally walk in freedom. Because if you've been betrayed by a jealous sibling, you need to know, it wasn't your fault. You don't have to keep proving yourself to them, you don't have to keep apologizing for your growth. You can grieve the relationship that once was, you can mourn the closeness you lost. But you can also choose to rise anyway. Because sometimes peace doesn't come from fixing it, sometimes peace comes from accepting that not everyone you love will love the version of you God is shaping. So bless them, love them. But don't let their silence steal your joy, don't let their distance make you doubt your direction. God didn't elevate you to impress people, He elevated you to fulfill purpose. And anyone who truly loves you will celebrate the hand of God on your life, even if they don't fully understand it. Let your rise be a testimony, let your growth be your worship. And if your siblings won't clap for you, keep walking anyway, because heaven is already standing. Some betrayals don't start with words, they don't start with obvious actions. They start with access. They start when you open your heart, your home, your life to someone you trusted completely. And when that someone is your own sibling, it feels natural. You're not just sharing resources, you're sharing your soul. You let them in because you thought they would protect what mattered most to you. You believed blood meant loyalty, you believed family meant safety. But then, one day, you turn around and realize the very person you trusted most has taken what was sacred and used it against you. That's a betrayal that cuts like a slow, deep knife. Not because it came from a stranger, no, because it came from someone you never expected. You offered help, and they used it as leverage. You gave them a seat at your table, and they turned it into a place of gossip. You shared your burdens, your fears, your secrets, and instead of guarding them, they exposed them. Sometimes out of spite, sometimes out of envy, sometimes just to gain favor with others. And you sit there, broken, wondering, how could someone so close turn so cold? There's something uniquely painful about being betrayed by someone you tried to help. Because you're not just hurting from what they did, you're hurting from the shock of who did it. You ask yourself, was it my fault? Did I trust too much? Did I miss the signs? But the answer isn't always clear. Sometimes there were no signs, sometimes your love blinded you to their resentment. You were trying to carry them, but they were quietly watching for the cracks in your armor. And it's not just what they did, it's how calculated it was. They knew what mattered to you, they knew who you loved, they knew where you were most tender. And still, they crossed the line. They brought division where there was once unity, they spread things you shared in confidence, they manipulated others, using the inside view you willingly gave them. Not because you were careless, but because you were honest, you were real, and they took that gift and turned it into a weapon. That kind of betrayal isn't easy to recover from. Because it doesn't just make you question them, it makes you question everyone. You start building walls, you stop letting people in, you stop sharing your struggles, your dreams, your fears. Because now you know, sometimes the one you're protecting is the one preparing to wound you. And that silence you've slipped into, it isn't peace, it's survival. It's the kind of silence that says, I'd rather be alone than be betrayed again. And maybe you're listening now, remembering that season. You gave and gave and gave, and they took and left you shattered. You helped them out of a hole, only for them to dig one for you. You defended them in rooms where they later spoke against you. You stayed up, praying for them, while they quietly plotted against your peace. And it's hard to even talk about, because who would believe it? Who would believe that a sibling, your own flesh and blood, could be so cold? But hear me, just because they betrayed you doesn't mean you were wrong to love them. It doesn't mean you should regret your kindness. You don't have to harden your heart to protect it, you just have to walk in wisdom. And wisdom says, I can forgive you, but I will not give you that access again. Wisdom says, I can wish you well, but I will no longer hand you the keys to my life. Wisdom knows the difference between helping someone and enabling a pattern that will only destroy you. Forgiveness doesn't mean pretending it never happened, it means releasing the weight of what happened into the hands of a God who saw it all. It means saying, I won't let your betrayal become my prison. It means healing, without reopening the door. Because while reconciliation is beautiful, it's not always possible and it's never forced. Some people will never own the pain they caused, they'll keep smiling, they'll keep pretending. And you'll be tempted to question your own memory. But hear this. You don't need their confession to find closure. You just need clarity. Clarity that says, what you did was not okay. I don't have to hate you, but I also don't have to trust you again. Clarity that says, family is supposed to protect, not exploit. And just because we share a last name doesn't mean you get first access to my life. Clarity that gives you the courage to let go, not with bitterness, but with boundaries. And if that betrayal still lingers in your heart today, If the memory of what they took from you still stings, know this: God is not blind to the injustice. He saw it, He knows it, and He will restore what was broken. He will honor your heart, He will bring peace where there was pain. Let them go not because they deserve it, but because you deserve to be free.